My best time was 2 hours and 16 minutes. And I actually ran that at the age of 35 after I had um peaked my training and was getting more involved in my business and wasn't able to spend as much time training.
Are you running a marathon? Oh my god, I could never run a marathon. You sure about that? My god, a marathon that's like 42 kilometers, 26 miles. I don't understand those people. That used to be me.
But not anymore. Welcome to the Marathon Podcast. My name is Christian Warwick, aka Warwick Runs on different platforms. Really happy to have you here. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. I want to start this episode just catching you up a little bit on my own running. It's not going very well. I mean, I'm on the third week of being sick. I thought that I was back, started running a little bit, but my body just doesn't seem to want to recover from whatever I caught. So as of right now, today it's 2 months until Valencia Marathon, and I'm not even running. So we'll see what happens. I don't think I should complain. I'm usually never sick, but this one has been a bit harder than the ones that I've had before. So it's a weird one. At least my voice is kind of back, and it's just that I'm feeling very off. This episode is a special one. You know, sometimes when I'm reaching out to people, I feel like it's a long shot. I reach out and I'm like, oh, this person probably will never see my message or will never respond. And I saw this photo, and we're going to talk more about this photo, but I saw this photo of a guy with two Nike shoes. One was from way back and one was from 2025, one of the recent color ways that Nike presented a few weeks back. And the man in the photo was Jeff Galloway, quite a legend within distance running. I mean, he's an Olympian. He trained with and he was good friends with Steve Prefontaine, and he is now a well-known coach. He's known for the method Jeffing. He is known for the Magic Mile calculator. There are so many things that Jeff has done for the sport of running, one as an athlete himself, but then later on as a coach, organizer of events. And I obviously admired him and I had a lot of respect for Jeff before our conversation. But after talking to him for an hour and a half, I was left kind of speechless. There were a couple of times where I didn't even know what to say because I thought it was so inspiring. And also, I learned a lot. And I think it's cool to hear the stories about Steve Prefontaine and how he was as a runner, how that has affected Jeff and the generations later on. And I think that if you're into running, whether it's marathons or just running in general, this episode will really be a good one for you. I think you'll like it a lot. I sure did. Time flew by, and yeah, I honestly can't believe that we have Jeff Galloway on. I am super stoked about this episode, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So without, again, wasting any more of your time, let's jump straight to the conversation with Jeff Galloway. Jeff Galloway, welcome to the Marathon Podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
It is great to be here, and I really am honored to be part of your efforts.
Yeah, thank you. And just like I told you before we started recording here, I admire you so much, and I want to actually, like, before you present yourself properly and we dive into everything running in your career and your journey, I wanted to ask you, because I saw a photo the other day of the new but also old Nike models with the colors, and you posted that you were one of few who probably ran in or had both of them. How was it to see those colors back?
It was really a surprise, first of all. My son Weston, who has grown up in the athletic shoe business because of my store, literally crawling on the floor when he was very young, pulling shoes off the rack and so forth. Well, he became a shoe designer for ASICS, and now, fortunately, has moved up to our CEO in our company, designing apps and bringing groups into what we do. But Weston follows the details on shoes and also the legacy. It is just a legacy that Nike came on board back in the 60s, actually, under a different corporate name. And their mission was to produce the best running shoes. Now, in the process, they also got into other sports, but their whole R&D was based on running. And so many of the running innovations that they developed are now standards in other sport shoes. They lived by the science. They lived by the medical advice of to keep people away from injuries. And to see those legendary shoes like the ones that my friend Prefontaine helped in the advice on developing, it's just a joy for me.
Yeah, you did mention Prefontaine here, and I want to ask you more about him later on in the episode. But before we do, and thanks for sharing that. You know, I just read the book of Phil Knight, Shoe Dog, the memoir. I
Yeah.
love that, and I loved getting to know that story, the story that you're kind of describing here. But Jeff, you have your own story, you have your own journey. If you were to present yourself to the listeners, who is Jeff, and yeah, what is your story?
Well, first of all, I was not a runner until I was 13 years old. My dad was in the U.S. Navy, and we were traveling constantly. I went to 13 schools during my first 7 years of schooling. And the reality hit on the 14th school that required all boys to go out for athletics after school. I had no skills, I had no fitness. I was lazy, extremely overweight, and yet I had to get out there and exercise, and I hated it. But I fell in to my academics during the day with a group of kids who were cross country runners, and mainly because they were fun. And they kidded me about being not active and said, "You've got to come out for cross country." So during the winter of that first year, I did. And the first 3, 4 days were awful. I was just exhausted after every workout. And it wasn't very long before I got exhausted because I had no conditioning. But within about 15 to 20 minutes after a workout, I got all of those powerful brain benefits that we do when we run. The good attitude circuit, the vitality circuit, the empowerment circuit to get home after being exhausted and then do the best homework assignments that I had done in my life. I was at the bottom of my class because of a lot of deficits in my academic background. But once I got in with those cross country runners who were mostly the top of their class, I reset my expectations of myself. I was not good in terms of competition. It took me 5 years before I even qualified to get into the regional championships of my state. I was just really not showing any signs of moving up to the next level. Why did I continue? Well, first of all, because of the friendships. Having been the new kid in classes for when I joined this new school 14 different times, it was very difficult to make friends. But as soon as I got on that cross country team, I had friends. I had good friends. But more than that, I felt better after my workouts than I had ever felt in my life. And I didn't have any idea why this was, but I didn't want it to go away. And my grades improved. I ended up in the top of my academic group. And I did not show any talent that the universities would want to include me on their teams. So I went to an academic institution, and as serendipity would have it, year behind me came a fellow named Amby Burfoot, and Amby, in his senior year, won the Boston Marathon. No other collegiate athlete has ever done that. And our school had no scholarships. It did not reward entering students in any way for joining athletic teams. You joined because you wanted to. And then a couple of years later, a fellow joined us named Bill Rogers, who has won the New York and the Boston Marathon 4 times each. And here we were at the school that did not finance anybody for athletic achievements. We went there for the academics and the chance to run because we wanted to run. And these two have remained close friends ever since. I communicate with Amby, uh, oh, usually 2 or 3 times a week at least, and it's just a wonderful world. Now, I also got involved with the Nike folks right from the beginning because when I graduated from my university, there was a thing in the United States called the draft, and that was a way to fill the ranks of the military with young people, males. And so I knew that, and there was a war going on, the Vietnam War. Well, I signed up for an officer program to give myself a little more control over where I might be assigned. And indeed, I served in the combat zone for a full 12 months. And unfortunately, I drank water that was laced with Agent Orange, which is a carcinogen that was used in that war. And it later, much later, caused my heart attack and my heart failure. But it gave me 3 years to reflect on what did I want to do after I got out of the Navy. And I clearly wanted to run. I missed running. I wanted to get back into it. And so when I got out, there were 2 years before the Olympics. And my major role was to just see how good I could become. I had no illusions that I would go to the Olympics. All I wanted to do is to qualify to get into the Olympic trials. And it took me the whole time of 2 years to do that. I didn't qualify for the 10K until 2 weeks before the trials. I had already qualified for the marathon. Um, so I go to the Olympic trials, ranked 12th in the 10K. It was a hot day. I had been training in Florida. I knew what damage heat does to you and your performance. I knew the pace that I could reasonably sustain. I was in last place for the first mile. And then people started coming back to me. And I went from last place to second place in that race and qualified to run in the Olympics in Munich, Germany. And it was the most glorious competitive moment in my life. 1 week later, however, what happened in the 10K race determined what would happen a week later. My good friend and founder of my club, the Florida Track Club, Jack Batchelor, who had been in the '68 Olympics and taught me an awful lot about distance running, competition, whatever, um, was he didn't qualify in the 10K. He finished fourth, but he had been exhausted during the last lap and was weaving, and he bumped into another runner who came by him to finish third right at the end. And a judge disqualified my friend Jack from the race. Now, the significance of that, I was a better marathoner, and the marathon was run 1 week later, according to the Olympics schedule. And if I had qualified a week later, I would have dropped out of the 10K rankings and let my friend Jack be the official qualifier. That was no longer possible. So um, I have always been a very good pacer. So I paced my friend Jack, and we went through the first mile in 100th place about. We had moved up to 61st place by 5 miles. We just kept moving up because I had to hold him back. He had tendency to go out too fast, which got him into trouble in the 10K. He had only run 17 miles, about 27K. And so he really wasn't prepared to go the distance. And that's why I had to keep him running slower in order to sustain his resources at the end. And even though he was really exhausted, he and I came in the stadium together in a tie for third place. And at the finish, I dropped back so he could be the official qualifier. Just a great experience for me to help a friend. And Jack ended up finishing ninth in the Olympic marathon, making our team the best team finish that has ever happened in the Olympics. First, fourth, and then Jack was ninth, three in the top 10.
Wow, this is, I'm sitting here listening, and I feel like your introduction is obviously the foundation for our whole conversation. And there are so many things to talk about here. But if we start with the last one, because I feel like what you're touching on is what we were talking about before we started recording, of the community, the friendships, what running can actually mean for us as runners. And you I think it's easy to think of running or sports as very, you're super competitive, you want to be the best. What made you, because obviously you could have qualified for the marathon yourself and not given up that spot. What made you want to help your friend Jack in uh, getting that spot?
It truly goes back to my first days of running as a 13-year-old and the support that I received from the other runners. I remember trying out for some other sports, which I was terrible at, and I really uh, didn't like the experience at all because people made fun of me because I didn't have skills, and it was such a totally different cultural experience in another sport than you find in running because people are supportive. I have visited hundreds of running groups over my 66 years of running, and in every single one of them, you see the camaraderie, the support for one another, the respect for one another. Um, well, Jack Batchelor had founded our Florida Track Club, and he really set a tone of excellence. And he also helped us whenever we had questions about training or something wasn't going right. Um, we asked Jack, and he would volunteer what he had found worked, and a lot of that stuff really helped me in my rise up to the top. Um, so I wanted to pay it back. I had a chance to do that, and very few people do. And it was just a wonderfully fulfilling experience to help my friend and then to see him do so well in the Olympics. We did try to swap, but it just really didn't work out for a lot of different reasons, including political, back in the Olympic bailiwick there. But I will add just a quick side note, and that is after making the Olympics and feeling the amazing experience of going there and of helping Jack and of getting all of the reactions that people had to my helping Jack qualify. It was so positive. I wanted to do something that would bring more people into running because I knew so many people could benefit the way I did. So the year after the Olympics, I decided that I would open a running store. And out of the running store, my main mission was to bring people in to help them improve the quality of their lives. And that has been the mission in all of my training programs now with the apps and the books and so forth. And I'm a very lucky person because people don't just read the book or use the app and go into uh, their own running area. They tell me about it, and I get so much great feedback. But I also get the questions, and so then there's another book coming out. And anyway, it's a great life that I have, and I have been blessed with the ability to help hundreds of thousands of people. It's just a great experience.
Yeah, and I feel like this goes back to what I told you earlier, and that is that I feel like you are, just like you're saying, you're all about helping this community and helping runners, and you're definitely a big part of making this community something that at least I really appreciate. And uh, I feel like if you look at your career, you have your individual path of like as an athlete trying to do as well as you can yourself, while also helping people like your friend Jack, but also after with coaching. And I definitely want to talk more about your coaching, Jeffing, all the method, your books. But before we do, if we look at your training, so you said you started running when you were 13. It took you 5 years until you actually started doing pretty well. You also mentioned Steve Prefontaine. You were kind of a part of that generation that I think a lot of people would say that almost started this running revolution. And in some way, maybe people were already running a little bit, but you mentioned like what Nike did with the shoes. They started making it more for the people, something that became more common. And how has that been, and how aware were you back then of that you guys were kind of in this category of people, mm, maybe inspiring just your average Joe to actually run by your performances?
Well, as you identified, each of us who gets into running develops an energy to want to talk to other people about it and find ways of connecting with people and then helping one another, respecting one another, helping one another. And I have seen some rather dramatic changes in personality once people get into running. Folks who used to be very self-centered, very narcissistic, and they really start helping other runners and then helping other people and finding careers that they would have never they told me they would have never chosen that career. And as a result of some of these choices, they have helped so many people do things that are amazing things in various fields. Running is a catalyst that really helps you do that. But for us, back in the 60s, we weren't looking at trying to establish a legacy or anything. We just enjoyed running against one another, running with one another, training together. I slept on well more than my share of couches and floors as I traveled the country running in races and then staying with friends. Um, and it's just a wonderful treasury now of great experiences. Now, Steve Prefontaine is, of course, our most legendary athlete in the U.S. I became connected right with him because of my best friend in life, who was the number 3 employee at Nike, actually, because he was the number 3 employee of Blue Ribbon Sports, which was the company before Nike came on board. But Jeff was a networker within the very first days before Nike, before Blue Ribbon Sports was even incorporated. He did stuff behind the scenes. He worked directly with Bowerman on shoe designs and on facilitating so many things. He opened the first Nike and Blue Ribbon Sports actually store in Eugene, Oregon. You know, the storied center of the running universe in the U.S. Um, but Jeff was Pre's mentor. And when Pre started doing part time work while he was still competing and going to university, um, Jeff was the guy that he was assigned to because Jeff Hollister was so good at that. And Jeff wrote a book. I helped him with a publisher in that book. It's called Out of Nowhere, and it it really tells a lot more of the behind the scenes stuff that was actually going on during that era. And he brought Pre into all of this. And so he would have me come out to Oregon and do clinics quite regularly during the early years. And it was just a wonderful experience to get to know the key people who made that company work, including Buck Knight, who wrote the book Shoe Dogs, as you know. But there's so many great stories. Another good book, by the way, is Swoosh. It is it has it is so well written and so well documented, and it has a whole lot more stuff that I know you would enjoy greatly.
Thanks. I'll definitely add that to my list so I can listen to it on my next run. I was thinking about it here, how cool this is, because I finished that book, I don't know, 3 4 weeks ago, and when I was reading it, I was like, I feel like I'm so far away from this, and then I'm talking to you, and it's just like one connection away from kind of the whole storyline of the book, right? A- And I can't help to, wonder when you're talking about this, and like you said, Prefontaine being the biggest legend in American sports, probably. His legacy is just hard to even start to describe. I know that you did train some with him. If you look back at him and the things that he did, what was the key like takeaways for you, and why do you think he was so good?
Well, first of all, I had a lot of things in common with Pre, even though he was younger than I was by about 6 years. And that really was the foundation of our friendship because Pre, when he first came on the scene as a world class athlete, was always wearing his game face. He would look at all the other runners around as competitors to him. Well, he knew whenever he ran against me that he could whip my butt. He knew that, and I knew that. And so I was no threat to him. And I was really, I served the role of the older brother that he never had. He had sisters. And it was just a great relationship because I could tell him when he was BSing. I could tell him to his face, and we could laugh about things that both of us had done stupidly. Um, anyway, um, Pre, I guess his greatest contribution to me in terms of the training was that I'd never seen anybody before or since that worked harder than he did. A lot of people are world class athletes because of their genetics. Clearly, in my mind, Pre did not have that. Um, he and I, when we were in the ninth grade, um, did not run below 5 minutes in the mile. Talented people in running start off the bat in the ninth grade, and they're down 30 seconds faster than that in the mile. Neither of us showed potential. We worked to get what we achieved. And Pre would stay on that track as long as he could. And I saw him in so many workouts to where he was staggering at the end of those workouts. But he was determined to get in what he set or one of his coaches set to be done that day. Um, and as a result of that, he inspired all of us to try to do the same thing.
Yeah, and what you're saying there, I think, is something that at least I find very interesting because you already talked a lot about the community of having friends and all of that. But what usually happens, and we see that with the marathon today, right? Especially if you look at US marathoners, how the level is so much higher with Conor Manson, you have Clayton Young, you have so many fast marathoners today. And that is most likely a result of someone pushing those limits, making sure that other people keep working harder. And that it sounds like that's what you're kind of describing with Prefontaine, that he brought something into your group or your generation, maybe even to kind of that bring that mentality into running and into the work ethic. How would you say that if you look at the since you are a few years older than him, you were able to experience both before and after. What would you say were the biggest changes if you look at the group and runners who were competing before and after Prefontaine?
Well, Pre has not been given, in my opinion, the credit for producing the professional level that we have today, which is the reason why U.S. athletes and other athletes are achieving so well. The rules back when Pre and I were coming along were according to the amateur uh, creed, which was set up by the Olympics. You couldn't compete in the Olympics if you had received any funds from sponsors or from races or whatever. So we all had to support ourselves from doing some type of other work and squeeze in our training appropriately. In addition to that, it was a situation of trying to uh, connect up with other runners once they had graduated from university and being able to train together. Um, what Pre did in every aspect of his life is test the limits to that. He said, "This is BS. This should not be done." Other sports they're allowed to be professionals and be the best that they can, and we deserve that. Well, he pushed all of the federations in the U.S. and the IOC and the IAAF, and he did things that could have gotten him disqualified. But he had such a powerful amount of goodwill that he had developed through his competition and through helping other athletes come up. And he also wouldn't say no. If somebody said, "You can't do this," he said, "Well, I'm going to." And he would push the limits. And as a result of that, um, our government, our Congress, uh, after he died, decided that they needed to take action, and they did, and uh, they passed laws that gave athletes rights. And Prefontaine, a number of other people in my generation, Kenny Moore, who was also on our Olympic team in the marathon, and he was the guy that finished fourth in Munich in the marathon. But Kenny Moore was very much involved in writing a lot of the stuff on that Bill of Rights for athletes. And a lot of other athletes got involved as a result of that when they could have been disqualified. They could have been kicked out of being able to ever compete in the Olympics again. But Pre was the guy that really not only got that started, but provided the energy and the courage to do that. And because of that, athletes can now support themselves and a lot of them in a very good way by their competition. And this is really the way it should have been.
Yeah, I agree with you because when I started learning more about Prefontaine, I realized how big of an impact he had on sports in general, not just running and track and field, but as a whole and U.S. sports. And I obviously want to bring this back to you and your career because unfortunately we lost Prefontaine way too early. It's hard not to wonder where the sport would have been today if he was able to be here today and kind of build on what he started. But in some ways, I guess that maybe the things that he started, you guys were able to, keep building on. And you as an athlete, but also as a coach later on, how would you say that those years with him or the experiences and the things that he started, how has that shaped you?
Well, those experiences with Pre are alive to me today. Pre and I would talk often about what we were going to do when we were no longer competing at the world class level, because that's a temporary experience in one's life. And Pre watched me established the very first running store in the United States on very little capital, $2,000 capital. And I started a store, and the store grew and grew. And he also didn't just watch the economics of what we did, but he was watching how I did that. And it was by starting training programs that came and went out of the store. Uh, I started putting on races that the store would promote to bring new people into running. I developed special coaching programs and writing books. I've written 37 books. And he saw all this happening and he wanted to do something like that. Um, he and I went to a clinic one time just a couple of months before he died. And he was going to have a date that night with a young lady that he had been wanting to have a date with for a long time. And we had a 2 hour drive back to Eugene for that date. We got held up at the last place where we were because my friend Jeff Hollister, who was handling our promotions there, had told a coach that he would come over and talk to that team. So we go over to this thing, and Pri is not in a good mood because he knows he's going to miss his date that evening. Um, and it's a group of uh, juvenile detention kids who got into trouble and were in this facility, and they had a running club, and they were just as excited about running as they were in more so than anything else in life, and they idolized Pre. Well, Pre comes in there, and he is just on fire, answering questions, challenging them, giving them great advice. And so we leave there finally very late, and we're driving back, and Pre, who had been pinging me with all types of thoughts all the way down there, didn't say a word for 10 minutes. And I said, Pre, what's wrong with you? And he said, if it wasn't for running, I could have been one of those kids. And he realized that, and he wanted to do something about that. So he had a lot of things going on. One of the things was he and I were working on a program for Nike to get into communities and to do grassroots promotions. And this would be done under the guidance of my friend Jeff Hollister, who really was given that mantle by the Nike folks. And sadly, we were not able to facilitate any of those things. But to answer your question, what do I think running would be like if he had not been killed? I think that a lot of the things that have happened to running becoming a mainstream activity would have happened sooner. And I think there would have been a whole lot more people because of Pre's energy, his charisma, and his ideas. He was full of ideas, and we were talking all the time in the 2 months before he passed away about that. We lost more than just a legend.
Yeah, I'm really sad that he wasn't able to obviously compete and show what he was good for, because I feel like he he wouldn't have that much competition, I think, if he was able to just keep on where he was at, because he would just be so good. But maybe he also would push that competition so a lot of others would be able to run faster. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, I can't get enough of this. I love hearing about it, and but I also want to hear more, about you, and we talked about your Olympic journey to with the 10K in the Olympics and qualifying for the Olympics, but you obviously also were a very big or great marathoner. So just to establish, if we go into a bit of your methods and your philosophy when it comes to training, but for the listeners, what is your personal record in the marathon?
My best time was 2 hours and 16 minutes. And I actually ran that at the age of 35 after I had peaked my training and was getting more involved in my business and wasn't able to spend as much time training. Most of my marathons during my whole career were run in hot conditions. So I know that I left some time on the table, but that doesn't matter these days. What does matter to me is that I decided that there was something special about the marathon and any of the long distance events and what they do for people as they train. And that, in other words, the determination that you have to set a goal and you have to get out there every other day at least and prepare for that goal. And you have to make adjustments. And you're going to have bad days when you think it's over. You're not going to be able to do that. But I wanted to be a part of that training process. And so back in 1978, I started the first series of training programs for the average person in the U.S. And we we've had more than 400,000 people report on the method and how it works for them. My whole mission was to take away this stigma that you have to run every step, because I knew that was not necessary. Even in some of my world class performances, I had taken walk breaks. I did so when I set my personal record of 2:16. I took about a 15-second walk break every 2 miles all the way through from the beginning of it, and I improved my personal record by 2 minutes over the times when I tried to run nonstop from the very beginning. So I started experimenting with these groups out of the store, and I found that I could not only attract people who never would have thought about doing a marathon if I promised them that they were going to be taking walk breaks very soon in every single training run that they took. Uh, well, the common response to that is, well, I could do that. And they did. And some of these bare beginners, 4 or 5 years later, were running very fast times. So then I started collecting data on it, and as I said, we have more than 500,000 uh, bits of data on people and their results. And we have found that in marathons, people improve an average of 13 minutes if they have been running nonstop and they find the right run, walk, run strategy. But the whole concept here, as I have gone back through the physiology, cardiology, the whole training method, is and actually anthropology, because the anthropologists that I have interviewed who have studied ancient man do not believe that our ancestors ran long distances regularly. Um, yes, maybe there were some few individuals, but our ancestors mainly starved to death. That was the major cause of death. And they walked everywhere they went, according to the anthropologists, because you could walk a whole lot longer on the same food. And so we're designed to go extremely long distances. And we have all those physiological abilities based on our ancient ancestors. But running nonstop was not one of the things we're designed to do. And so two things happen if we run nonstop from the beginning of something long like a marathon. The first one is that we are exhausted by the end and slow down. And the average slowdown, as I studied it, was somewhere around 13 to 15 minutes. That's how you can improve your time, by not slowing down, by using walk breaks from the beginning. Because with every walk break, you erase the fatigue buildup in the muscles. And you also erase the buildup of stress on the weak links. Those are the areas where people get injured. So, with every walk break, if it's done often enough from the beginning, you release that stress buildup on places that used to get injured, and they don't get injured anymore. And so, once we took away the exhaustion and the aches and pains that people get when they train for marathons, we started to see this whole influx of people. I don't know whether you've heard about the Run Disney races that we have in the United States, but
Yep.
I'm the official training consultant for those races. And at every given race, I have thousands of people through the weekend that come up to me and tell me their story. They were diabetic, they were totally out of shape, they weighed 100 pounds more, they were at Disney, they saw one of the events, they saw the medals, and they saw people that looked the same as they look, and they were finishing these races. And they wanted some of that. So they looked at the website, they found my program that said, you can just run 10 seconds and walk 30 seconds, and you can do marathon, half marathon, whatever. The amazing thing with this whole new group of people is that they go out and bring their family members, and they bring their friends, and they are changing the whole concept of what fitness is in the United States. It's not something that necessarily is based on times and races. It's based on finishing, and finishing 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40 years from now. I'm 80 years old now, and I look forward to my next marathon that's going to be in December. And I'm, you know, other people are saying, well, this is going to be your last marathon. Well, I'm not saying it's going to be my last marathon, um, but I do have a chance to become the very first person who has run a marathon and finished a marathon in 8 decades of life in December. And so I'm going for
Wow. Wow, wow. I'm sitting here, and when I was, because I was looking at some discussions that people had about, because the theory, or the what you're talking about here, is also known as jeffing, right? That's
Yes,
what they
absolutely.
call it, and I saw that people were saying that, yeah, this is a great strategy, and what it's kind of advertised as is for those running 3:30 marathons ish, or maybe when you go faster, that's not the strategy to go with. But then you're talking about this, and you did a 2:16 marathon, and you used that strategy. And obviously 2:16 for you back then was also not in what we today have with the super shoes, and maybe there are a lot of new things that technology has brought with it. So I don't know if you would want to guess what your time could have been if you had access to the new things today. But with that, if you were to do that, but also look at the best athletes today, if they integrated some of the jeffing into their racing strategy, do you think that they could have done better, or do you think that it's hard with the when they're getting closer to like 2:05, that then it's hard to walk a single feet because of the level they're at?
Well, a lot of the world class athletes today that I have talked to use the method in their training because they recover faster. They're not beat up after long runs, so they can do quality work just a couple of days later and have improved their performance according to what they say as a result of that. Uh, Now, in terms of when you're running 4:30 a mile on a marathon, you're right. You don't have many seconds to deal with. My theory, and I don't have anybody that has tried this yet, but uh, someone who is running at 4:30 pace or something like that, uh, the amount of walking you would do would be done during the first half of the race, and it would only be a few seconds, and it would be done similar to what I did. I ran 2 miles before taking a walk break, so every 2 miles. Probably for 4:30, we're talking about every 4 to 5 miles. There would be a short walk break, but I truly believe that there would be some athletes that would have more resiliency in their legs. And it may be only 5 to 10 seconds, but that could win a race at the end.
Yeah, I want to ask you if I was to use a specific example here, because I always ask the guests that are on about the long run, have they solved that? And in this case, I would like to ask you, say I went out for a long run and I chose to do a bit more of a steady long run, and say I did 20 miles for this long run. I would always the load on my body would be pretty high. I would be pretty tired after if I did, say I didn't do like marathon pace, but a bit slower than that. I would still have to, it would take me a few days to recover, maybe even more than days. If I was to use jeffing in this, and for the listeners listening to this, if they want to try it out, how would I do that? How would I, solve that part in a, say, a 20-mile long run?
Well, first of all, we have done a lot of research in our Galloway programs on what walk breaks work best. And it's based on pace per mile in terms of what you're capable of running. So I set up and discovered through a lot of research about 30 years ago a component in our training called the magic mile. The magic mile is a predictor, and it's a very accurate predictor over what your potential would be during the next 6 months. You run a 1 mile for time, and then you can use our calculator, and it will tell you what is predicted in a marathon, a half marathon, a 10K, a 5K, and other distances. But it allows you to set realistic goals. Quite honestly, I talk to a lot of people who don't use our method and ask them what their goals are. And when I find out what they've run in other races, most of the time their goals are not realistic. And this is a source of great disappointment for them later on. But if they were realistic, they could start with a good foundation and be able to build upon that and then keep improving and sustain that improvement. Um, Taking the Magic Mile, it will set up a not only a safe goal pace for the marathon or half marathon, whatever it is, but it'll also set up a training pace um, where you have a speed limit. Now, by speed limit, I mean we found categorically that there is no pace that's too slow for long runs. We even have had people break 3 hours in the marathon who, because they were injured or sick or whatever, had to mostly or exclusively walk all of the key long runs at the end of the program, and they still broke 3 hours in the marathon. And it's been so many of those people that we know that's not a fluke. It you're going to get the same endurance if you walk the entire distance of a long run. Um, by walking more, you're going to be able to have resiliency in your legs. You're going to recover fast. You're going to be able to move on with your training program and not get injured. So that is another benefit from using that Magic Mile and then using the calculations. Now, with the calculations, our Run Walk Run database clicks in, a database of more than 500,000 people. What we segmented the data in is pace per mile. And based on pace per mile, we found after 10,000 people or so in each given pace what were the best and most successful strategies. So, for example, for a 12-minute per mile pace, the strategies are 60 seconds run, 30 seconds walk, or 45 seconds run, 30 seconds walk, or even some run faster and run 30 seconds and 30 seconds. Um, if for other paces, of course, it changes. If you go to 10 minutes per mile, it's 90 seconds run, 30 seconds walk, or 60-30. Going on down, it becomes, when you're running faster, you're running longer runs and you're staying with 30 seconds of walk. So that a 3 hour marathon would be something like a 5 minute run and a 30-second walk, or a 2.5 minute run and a 15-second walk. Some type of using that. But the secret of it is using it from the beginning, because the first walk breaks are the ones that erase all the fatigue. And if you keep doing that, you're going to be the one that's passing so many people at the end. And let's face it, there's no glorious moment in a marathon than there is when you're passing people, and it pulls you along. And with Jeffing, that's what we see happening.
Yeah, you're right. I think that a lot of people, myself included, like when you hear about this the first time, you're like, oh, but I can't walk. Like I'm gonna lose so much time, and then you know how that last stretch of the marathon first of all, how it feels, right? You know that you're losing speed yourself, but also seeing people, whether it's cramping up or they're just out of juice and just can't run any faster. So yeah, this is very very interesting. I remember a friend of mine told me before my first marathon, he was like, don't be afraid of walking whenever you're at a or drinking station. Just walk, it's okay, you know. And my instinct was like, no, I can't walk, but this kind of confirms that.
Yeah, it really does, and we have the data. It's huge amount of data.
But how when you plan, obviously, because as a coach you're training your athletes, so one thing is you have this strategy during the race itself, and you did mention already a little bit about what like that long run could look like, for instance. But in terms of the training plan, do you have this concept in all the runs, or do you also have then some runs that are without walking? What does that look like?
We don't recommend that people take the walk breaks out of long runs because if you do that, you're going to be significantly more tired and you could compromise your ability to recover. We see that all the time. People say, well, I loved your program. I used it three-quarters of the way through. I was feeling so good, as a matter of fact, at the end, that I started running my long runs nonstop. And then the bad stuff comes in, and it will come in because something's going to break when you run nonstop for long distances. And one thing that compromises it all is the muscle fatigue that will slow you down at the end of a marathon. But jeffing will allow you to avoid all of that. It's an amazing thing. It's real simple to do. The other thing that I discovered with the help of my friends back in the day, mainly Kenny Moore, uh, a guy who, like myself, didn't show a lot of potential running wise during his high school years. He didn't win a single race in his high school track career. And he ended up fourth in the Munich Olympic Marathon. And
Wow.
he ended up running below 4 minutes in the mile. So he had a great range of really fast ability, fast times in various races. But the year before the Olympic trials and the Olympics in Munich, I was at a meet and greet with him, and I asked him what were some of the things he did with his training to avoid hitting the wall and having that slowdown. At the time, my longest runs were 20 miles, which was the convention at the time, even at the national class level. But Kenny was winning races. He was our top marathoner that year and the year before. And so I asked him what he did for long runs, and he said 30 miles. And all of a sudden, it was one of those amazing revelation moments. I hit the wall at 20 miles, and I run 20 miles in training. He runs 30, and he doesn't hit the wall and wins races. Duh. And it really is that simple. But you must slow the long runs down in order to do that, or you'll suffer. If you try to run them nonstop, it's like running a race, and you may not recover. Most people don't recover fully anyway who run nonstop on long runs.
Yeah, I had Ingrid Christiansen on the podcast a few weeks ago, and she was talking about the exact same thing, that a lot of people do them too fast, right? Like you do the long runs at such high intensity that you might end up having a better performance on your long runs than your actual race.
It happens all the time. And that really played into my hand during the Olympic trials because I um, had not beaten myself up on the long training runs. I had I'd actually gone by mistake all the way up to 33 miles before running that Olympic trials marathon, but I had done it extremely slowly. And the others told me that they couldn't understand. They had run these long runs so well, so fast. Why couldn't they put it together in the marathon? I said, well, case in point.
I'm curious about what is your take on, or why do you think that is? Because I have like usually in my head I have this, you know, this glass, and I say that when you fill it up with higher intensity, if it's too much, then you won't have anything left to kind of work with when you get to race day. And then I say that if you are able to fill it up like halfway, then you'll have half the glass to just push with when you come to race day. That's just like the way I look at it. How do you look at this? Because I think a lot of people will say it's contradicting to run slower on the long runs, that but you will still run faster when you're running that distance in an actual race.
Well, my answer to that is we've got over 500,000 evidences of that. We've got 500,000 success stories among people that followed my Jeffing method of running the long ones slowly and then having it, whatever it was that they were capable of doing, as a personal record when they got into their marathon race itself. Um, the training for something like a marathon involves components of training. So the long run is really there for endurance. It's if you try to include speed in any way, you're going to suffer in some way when you get into the marathon itself because you just don't have all of your resiliency and strength. You're still recovering from that. And by going slow, putting walk breaks in, you can reserve that strength and be able to perform. It's up to you. I mean, all of us are the captains of our running ship. We determine what pace we run, whatever. My role is just to find a smarter way to do it. And I was not a talented runner. I improved because I just got smarter at training and then in racing.
I hope that the listeners listening to this will go out and run slower now. I definitely will. Because we started a bit later, I've taken up all your time. I don't know. Do you have time for two more questions?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I will say one more thing. The
Hmm.
rule of thumb in slowing down on long runs is 2 minutes per mile slower than is predicted by the magic mile in the marathon. Now, that is the fastest that you would run. You can always go slower than that.
And if people want to, because obviously I'm gonna link your website and everything down in the show notes of this podcast. But if people want to just go and try this calculator for the Magic Mile, where can they find that calculator?
We have an app that has actually, we have two apps, and they have a free download and a free run, walk, run timer. And on those apps, we have the calculator.
Great. Then I advise people listening to this to go download that app and check it out. I
It's on the
definitely
App
will.
Store. Yeah.
Yeah. So we obviously talk a lot about training, and I want to talk. You said that you've published 37 books, and you talked about your races that you're hosting, and I feel like you kind of answered it already, but I wonder, where does all of this, you know, motivation to share all this come from? Because obviously you could say that there's something in it financially, but to do all of this, I can tell that there's so much passion here. And where does that come from for you?
Well, I really have not made a tremendous financial reward out of my businesses. My passion has always been to help people because that gives me so much inside of me. It's just amazing. Every single person, every day I hear from several who say, this changed my life. At the Disney races, there are thousands that come up to me and they say, "You have changed my life for the better. You've saved my life." And they tell me the stories. They're amazing stories. I'm a lucky person. There are very few people that have the opportunity to help people improve their lives in significant ways. And it's through this method that we're doing that. And the other thing about the passion is to keep looking for more ways. The biggest breakthrough occurred when I wrote my mental training book and was able to access uh, hundreds and hundreds of research studies on what goes on in the brain when we run. It's powerful stuff, folks, including the growth of new brain cells. When you're out there for more than 30 minutes of running and walking, you turn on a hormone called BDNF that grows new brain cells. The scientists call it miracle grow for the brain because that is what it does. But you're also turning on these circuits that were created by our ancestors millions of years ago to be able to keep going when they were exhausted, to keep going when they hurt, to be able to get to that next food supply so the tribe could have food and survive. And today that's translated into we're surviving because the brain's working better. We're better at work. We're better in dealing with stresses in the family or whatever else. And we're going to feel more satisfied with what we're doing in life if we add running to the mix. And the running doesn't have to be but just a little bit of running, of 5 seconds of running and 30 seconds of walking.
Yeah, I support this. I'll send you after the call. I'll send you a little documentary that I made on my own running journey because I was dealing with a lot of anxiety, and after I started running, my fiance can tell you how much that changed things, and I agree with what you're saying. There are such big benefits, and I'm really happy to see this running boom that we're now seeing because I think that it will help people, so it will help people, but it will also help us as human beings. I think the more people run, the better it will be for the world. So I think that's great.
Well, there's a lot of documentation on that in terms of the calming thing. I've learned so much because there's a lot of research out there, and why it hasn't been put out. That's the reason why I wrote the mental training book. I've got a lot of it in that book. But after 30 minutes, if you're stressed, your brain starts producing calming hormones. Now, you got to stay out there for 30 minutes. But if you do, you are rewarded by finishing that run and you've actually chilled out.
Yeah, exactly. I love hearing this. I can't wait for people to hear it too. So, but I feel like what you were talking about earlier, or in the introduction, you said you had some heart problems and stuff. How did you come back to running? How were you able to get back to that? Because I feel like if people listening to this, they might have had something similar or dealing with something. Were you ever worried that you wouldn't be able to run again?
Oh, absolutely. That was the worst time in my life for so many reasons. First of all, I didn't really understand why it happened. A lot of people questioned how could this happen to me, and I was one of those after my heart attack because I had a great diet for 40 years. My wife provided that. Um, I had great exercise my whole life, 60 years at the time. I had exercised heart healthy stuff. Um, I didn't have any family history of heart disease or anything. I didn't have any risk factor. It didn't make any sense. And then a friend of mine who's an investigative reporter said, "You were in Vietnam, weren't you?" I said, "Yeah, I was in the combat zone." Well, I was on a ship and we got our drinking water from taking it out of where the rivers were dumping out. So I was drinking Agent Orange, which was this horrible carcinogen, and it forms small cracks in the beginning, and then after 15, 20 years, they get bigger and bigger and attract plaque. And then at age 75, all of a sudden, um, I had a heart attack. And then 6 days later, heart failure. And it could have really been over at that time. If I had been anywhere else but the hospital, I wouldn't be here today. They tried CPR and it didn't work. Fortunately, I was in the hospital. They had the paddles. They got the heart started again. Um, but because I had those two dramatic incidents within a week, they kept me in the hospital for 8 weeks. And it was, I wanted to get out. I wanted to walk. They didn't even want me to walk very much at the time because I had had heart failure. They wanted to see what was going on. I got a pacemaker. Life is good. I started back after 8 weeks of almost total inactivity. And I thought in my mind, well, I'm going to get back pretty quickly. I couldn't believe how much I had lost. Of course, I was 75 years old, but up until that point, I had been running a marathon every month. And
Wow.
all of a sudden, I couldn't run more than 3 seconds at the start without going into major huffing and puffing and getting dizzy. Well, I used my method to very gradually add a few seconds of running and then have the 30 seconds of walking, which I found to be the best for most people. And then I still have to vary it because there's still a lot of damage there. But it has allowed me to innovate in my training program further for marathons. As I'm training for the Honolulu Marathon this December, I am running it in segments, and I will run 6 to 8 miles in segments and then take a 10-minute break to cool off and to get some hydration in me and get back out for another 6 to 8. And as a result of that, I've actually been able to advise a number of other people that have gone through these same challenges and are able to get back into it again. And I'm writing a book called Cardiac Comeback as a result of that.
Like I told you, I'm just full of admiration. This is really, I feel like, I don't know, I'm almost left a bit speechless because I just admire your mentality, but also your findings. I'm really happy that you're sharing this with me here, but also with the world through your books and your programs. And yeah, so thanks for that. Really appreciate it.
Well, I
And
appreciate you sharing it because that's how we get more people into this and help them.
exactly. No, thank you, Jeff. And just to bring this conversation kind of back to where we started, I'm curious because you have been, I would say that in terms of the running shoe technology, you've been around for almost the whole whole journey or whole lifespan of that. And obviously, you have the shoes that you were showing in that photo, and you have the Nike Alpha Flies today. Super shoes. So I want to try to challenge you a little bit on what I asked you before. What do you think your time would have been in the marathon, and what do you think of the evolution of these shoes? If you so your time in the marathon, if you were able to run in the super shoes.
Well, I really uh, don't like to answer what ifs type things because you know, especially when you've had such a fulfilling life as I have, what ifs don't mean that much. Um, I know I could have run faster. And of course, there's so many variables in a marathon. It's not just shoes. If it were shoes alone in terms of improvement, um, I would I would be willing to bet because of so many blisters got and slowed me down at the end of races. Shoes of old. I would be willing to bet that it would probably be about 2 to 3 minutes faster. And of course, I now know more about training, and I know there would be some things there too. But I had a great career, and it was really super. But I do want to take a very slight, few second break, and I want to show you one of
Great.
my original shoes.
Look
Here
at
it
that.
is. Look at this beauty, a gum sole shoe, canvas upper. It was uh,
Wow.
it was made by the Converse company that were famous for their basketball shoes. But that is where I started. That was my very first pair of shoes.
It's crazy to look at that because I feel like if you gave that to any runner today, they would be like, "Nope, I'm never gonna run a single mile in those because that's gonna hurt my knees or my calves, whatever." It's an interesting evolution of the running shoes.
Yeah, I got in right at the beginning when the shoes that we had when I started in 1958 were shoes that had been around even of that time for 20 or 30 years. And there wasn't any real impetus to improve the running shoes because the market was so small. Uh, and I have just seen it totally change in so many good ways.
Yeah, I I really, again, really just I'm grateful or appreciate that you took your time to share all of this because I feel like it's been a lesson in how to train, how to get better, but also a history lesson in a lot of ways. And I appreciate you taking us with you on this journey through time, kind of.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much. And if there's any other way I can help you, don't hesitate. I'd love to
Thank
help.
Thank you. Maybe we need to do another episode because I feel like there are more things that I would like to ask you. So maybe we just need to schedule another one at some point.
Well, you've got it. And there are a lot of things that we could cover.
I appreciate it. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Jeffing. That's an interesting one that I think I want to try out a little bit in some of my trainings. I'm very curious about how that would work in a marathon training. No, sorry, marathon race. I think that a lot of us we will kind of be a bit skeptical to this whole thing. Feel like we can't stop and run, but that's also what Jeff said. Like it's not about stopping for a very long time, and he gave me the thumbs up when I was talking about slowing down and maybe walking a little bit for like at the drinking stations. Him doing a 2:16 with this method obviously like kind of confirms that it works. So really, really interesting stuff. And like we said at the end of the conversation, Jeff definitely needs to come back on and talk more about his experiences, his story. Like I feel like we could have kept on talking for hours, and obviously we were not able to this time. So we'll just try to have Jeff on at some point. Thank you so much for listening to the Marathon Podcast. Please give this podcast a review if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it. That would help me to grow this podcast, and share it with a friend. And obviously follow it on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you for listening. Really appreciate you being here. And until the next one. You listen to the Marathon Podcast, brought to you by Wall Studio.